Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. Today I want to talk with you about money, especially about the relationship of being an artist and making a living with it. I also not only want to share my experience, but I also want to share experience from other professions with you. So for that, I invited the amazing Sinix.
Hey everyone, Sinix here.
Ahmed Aldoori.
Thanks for having me, Janosch.
And Zapata for this.
Zapata here.
As a disclaimer, this YouTube series is only for educational purposes, and all the informations given by my guests or myself are from our personal experience as professionals. So let's talk about money. A couple months ago, I did a poll on my YouTube channel where I asked, how much money would you charge for your first job? And more than 50% would charge less than $100 per day, which make me wonder, do you actually know how to calculate your daily rate? Obviously, the minimum wage and the GDP of your country plays also an important role in calculating your own rate. But with the power of the internet and working remotely, more and more people can work where they live and they can actually charge more in different conditions. And theoretically, this could close the gap for people who are living in a low GDP country versus a high GDP country. Why would artist A charge less than artist B if they have the same skill set and can do the exact same work? But of course, this is easier said than done. I just want you to keep in mind that every undercut in your own rate has an effect on the global community of artists working on the open market. It is also an essential skill to learn really to not undervalue or underprice yourself. And maybe you already made the experience of undersell or underprice yourself, accepting the job and then being at that job becoming very frustrated because the work is not fun, it's very tedious, you have to do a lot of work and you don't get paid much. You need to stay your ground and be confident. Do not undervalue your work and even more important, your time spending on making the artwork. Especially time, because it's the most important and valuable resource you have. When somebody asks you for any type of commission or to help them on a project, you should know before what is your hourly rate or what is your daily rate. Is this a calculation you should do every year again? Theoretically, you become better and better every year. I personally do that every year. I calculate what I believe justified the quality and price of my own work. When I started out, my father, who's a lawyer, gave me a really good advice. And when I asked him about how to price and position myself, he told me that I should only think about how do I value my own work and time. That's the most important question you should answer for yourself. And for this, I took my part-time salary in a bakery as an example. So in my part-time job, I was earning around 12 euros per hour. And I just doubled it, which would be 24 euros per hour, which leads to 192 euros for an 8-hour day job. I'm also living in Germany, so I added 30% of taxes on top, which is very important and you should never forget. And at the end, I had a day rate of around 249 euros and 60 cents. The amount of money you get paid at the end also depends on the way of negotiation. So it is even more important that you aim for something before you go into the talk of money and pricing. So what is always good to try to keep the full picture in mind. What are the most important questions to answer here? How do I price my art? What are my priorities? Is it important to learn and to focus on my career? Or is money and a high price important for me? So let's ask our guests how they calculated their first rate for their first job.
So question number one, how did you calculate your daily hourly rate for your first job / gig as an artist? Well, my first gig was a flat rate gig. So I just got paid a certain number for each design, which I would say is mostly not advisable because you don't know how many revisions or notes you're going to have to make on any of these designs, and it can very quickly spiral out, and then you're basically making definitely not enough after a certain amount of time. My first job where there might have been negotiation, there wasn't, but I didn't really do much to calculate that. I think that if you did like real calculations, like these are my expenses, right, every month as a person, and then that means I would need this much for this job to be worth it for me, that's going to change for everybody, right? Maybe you have kids, maybe you don't have kids, maybe you are financially independent for other reasons, so you're willing to do the job just to add to your resume or to get clout, even if it's not paying you nearly enough. I think everybody's gonna have different circumstances there, and surely calculating that way is useful for anyone to do based on their individual circumstances, but it's actually not the solution for everyone to sort of look at their expenses and then base what they're going to ask for a salary on what the expenses mean, right? Like I said, everyone's situation is different. But what's more important I think, or at least more generally applicable, is the idea of not underselling yourself. On my first job, I just went high, right? Even though I had no real experience, I just had that one gig before. I had a general idea of what I thought was high for someone going in right out of school. I won't say the name of the company, so I can say numbers instead. I pitched in my interview $50 an hour USD, which I was pitching it by the hour because when I first started that job, that was only supposed to be a short contract, like a month or a couple month long contract. And a lot of jobs in the art world can be like that. As a freelance rate, that's really not that high. But I knew that for someone who was just fresh and brand new and even still in school, hadn't even finished, I knew that that would be on the higher end of what you might expect to get paid. And I just winged it out there. The circumstances were right. I knew the company needed me. I had come recommended and it worked. And then that rate, they couldn't sort of lower what they were paying me when they made me full time. So it stuck with me. I know that the company was a little perturbed by that because I talked to one of my supervisors years later, and they told me yeah, that was high, but we couldn't go back we couldn't reduce your rate when we brought you on full time.
So it was a little bit different for me because the standard rates were pre-laid out pretty clearly for studio gigs as a start. I actually had a freelance gig with Scott Robertson at Design Studio Press. But yeah, you have to calculate how much you need to pay rent, right? So you have to figure out what your needs are. Me, I'm not willing to work 8 hours for, let's say, $6 an hour, obviously. I don't know. I think at first that you really don't, at least I didn't really have too much room to negotiate because it was like a really good job opportunity. So, but if you are freelancing, you have to take into consideration, if you're here in the United States, that freelancers don't really get covered by the company for health insurance and other benefits. So if an in-studio employee, for example, is making $25 an hour, you should be asking for more since you're not receiving the same benefits as an in-studio employee. But yeah, so normally starting out as an intern, you should know, at least here in the States, you're probably going to make around $15 an hour, sometimes more, but that's usually the standard. Later on with freelance, based on the connections I made at the internships, the starting rate at my gigs was starting to get high, more towards 20 an hour, 25 an hour, because I started having more opportunities. So really, I think you're in a more negotiating position when you have more opportunities to choose from. So if you don't have those, I wouldn't try to get more money out of only the one person who you're going to work for right away. And there was a kind of a blur. It went from like 20 an hour, 25 to 50 an hour, which at the time I thought was a lot for the kind of work that I did. Then I started finding out, oh my God, people are making way more. And eventually the rates became like $500 or $600 a day. So I don't really recall ever negotiating those numbers. I just happened to have friends that recommended me to places, and I got the same rate as they did because those studios thought I was already a professional. I was actually still a student. So honestly, it's like, a lot of times it's just who you know. But later on, you build a client list of many places, and to the point where you have to start saying no to gigs. And that's when you have negotiating power.
I think when it comes to calculating your hourly rate, the most important thing to keep in mind is just because you're excited to work. I know I was when I first started getting my jobs. It gives you the likely tendency to always undervalue yourself because you just want to do it so bad. I had to set a baseline for myself that was based on something I had read about skilled labor. Obviously, art is skilled labor. And I think the thing I had read is like every type of skilled labor should start at like $30, something in that part per hour. So as excited as I was to just get any job, I made sure to, even as a newbie, to still set the bar at like $30 an hour and then work upward, in future jobs as I felt like I was more valuable as a person. But if you're ever struggling with that, I always find it's helpful to just remember all the other types of skilled labors and what people are comfortable with paying them. Any kind of skilled labor come and do some work for you, you're not going to charge them like, $10 an hour or something like that. They're going to probably charge like $40, $50, maybe even like up to $100. I always found that very useful to keep in mind. Compare yourself to other types of skilled labor.
So when you calculate your own rate, there are certain things you need to consider. Time and effort you spend, so how long you approximately work on the stuff, and how much will you demolish yourself to come up with a good result, to make the client happy and to be proud of your work. Materials and costs you might have, and of course the quality of your work. So this was the first part of the money series. Big thanks to Steven, Sinix and Ahmed. Make sure to check out their YouTube channels. I put everything in the description below. Also, if you don't want to miss part 2 of the money series, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, I wish you good luck for your career and see you next time. Ciao, ciao.